Hey everybody, today I've got multiple ideas for what to paint on smaller to medium-sized canvases. These ones here are tiny. The other ones that I'm going to use are also still very small, but they just look a little bit bigger compared to these ones. I wanted to do this very satisfying thumbnail with all of the paint dots, but that was a lot of paint. So the first thing that I did was to spread all of the paint onto multiple canvases so that it wouldn't go to waste. And it was a lot of paint. I even took out a canvas that was a little bit bigger than these tiny ones, and I put even more of the paint on it. But the good thing here is that I already had a starting point and I didn't have to start on a blank canvas. So maybe this could be an idea for you to just throw random paint onto a canvas in the beginning, because if you have any fear of a blank page or blank canvas in that case, then I think that takes care of it pretty well. This canvas here is the bigger one. It is still a very small canvas, but compared to the others, it just looks a lot bigger. And this just prepped them sort of like an underpainting. So the first one here, you can see the purple dried really vibrantly. And I at first wanted to draw a cat that is sort of sleeping in beneath some greenery, maybe on a flower field or in a forest or just in nature in general. But the shape of the cat, I could not deal with it. It looked so weird. So I adjusted it. I made the cat a lot bigger, and it is still tiny, mind you, because these canvases are incredibly small. I bought these at a local store. It's a chain called Action, and they have a lot of these really, really affordable art supplies. They have a big variety of stuff. So I don't know if I can find the exact thing for you to link to, but I'm gonna check. I am pretty sure that these small canvases are available on Amazon and other websites as well. They usually aren't that expensive. I think they're a good starting point if you feel a little bit stuck and you want to paint on a canvas, you want something cute to display, then something like that could be a really good starting point, or even a warm-up before you're doing a bigger canvas. And here I used acrylic gouache, and I also allowed myself for, I think, the very first time to use colored pencils on top of a canvas. I don't know why it never occurred to me that that could be an option. It's just not something that you usually see, I suppose. But it worked really well for me here because the colored pencils allow me to have a bit more control than a brush. And so here I laid out all of the basic things on the cat. And then later on, I went back in with paint and I darkened up certain sections to give it more contrast. So this is not what it's going to look like in the end. But I think that the colored pencils also really helped with some of the texture and the gradients and the shading and all of that. And by the way, I mentioned that I am using acrylic gouache. You can recreate pretty much the exact same thing with regular acrylic paint if you don't have acrylic gouache. The reason why I use acrylic gouache is just because I don't really have high-end fancy acrylic paints. The ones that I use are more meant for crafting, and they're really thick and sticky in their consistency, and I find them really hard to paint with, and I don't particularly enjoy the process. But a few years ago, I bought these really huge sets of Turner acrylic paint and Holbein acrylic gouache, not acrylic paint, and these were pretty expensive, and so I wanna use them and not just have them on the shelf. So that's why I keep on using them in scenarios where you could also just use regular acrylic paint. The advantage of acrylic gouache is that it dries matte. For me, that's an advantage. I really like the look of that, but they're a lot pricier than acrylic paints. And so I totally understand if you don't own that much acrylic gouache or not any at all. So here you can see that I am adding more definition with the paint as well. So not just the colored pencil that was on the lighter side, it was more sort of like a sketch, but I left some of it still showing through, and I really enjoy the look that I got with that here. And for the fact that I was struggling with the shape so much in the beginning, I am pretty happy with how this turned out. There's not that much background, not that much greenery going on here, but what can you expect from a tiny little canvas like that? I don't know, I tried to fit so much on this, and in the end, going for something that's a little bit more on the simpler side definitely turned out to be a good thing. I also painted the edges of all of the tiny canvases. You're going to see that afterwards, but for now we're going to move on to the second one, and this is the one that I did the gradient on, where all of the dots were on. And I might test the A/B testing of the thumbnails that YouTube offers now, where you can upload up to 3 different thumbnails and then it tests for you which one performs the best. I might do that. So you might have seen the dots, the paint in the thumbnail, or you might have not. I don't know how this is going to end up working out, but here I definitely decided to do something that is inside my comfort zone because these canvases are so small. And when I don't know what to paint, I usually go for a mushroom. It's always been one of my favorite things to paint, especially with gouache and acrylics, because it is just such a simple thing that can be customized a lot though. You can add a lot of details to a mushroom, or you can leave it just plain, and it's gonna be cute either way. So I think it is very approachable for a beginner. And if you're really just beginning on your artistic journey and you haven't really done that much, then I definitely recommend trying a mushroom out and really allowing yourself to go for something simple. Also, if you are a beginner or more of an intermediate artist, definitely check out my new courses. I added 2 new courses recently to the Magic World. So I already did a Magic World farm course that was kind of like a farmland. And now I have added one that is this moody autumnal house in the forest. And I also added one that is this split screen where you can see partially underwater, partially over water, very surreal landscape with gouache. And all of these 3 courses are very step-by-step. You get a sketch outline, so you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to know how to draw. You can, if you want to, just use the sketch outline and just go from there. And you also get a workbook with all of the steps, some information about mixing, and everything else that you might need in order to recreate these pieces step by step. And for a very short amount of time, I will offer the Magic World's Savvy Bundle, where you can get all 3 courses and save in the process. So I will link that in the description box below. Make sure to click that and learn more about all of these courses. So for this next one, this started very simple. I was really not sure whether I would like the outcome of this, but this is one of my favorites, if not my favorite today. This is such a simple one, but it turned out so cute. I don't know why I love this one so much, but in the beginning, I was really doubting this one. I did not really enjoy the first layers that much. It definitely needed a bit of building up. My layers were also a little bit on the thinner side because I put quite a lot of water onto my palette so that the paints wouldn't dry out in the process. You can also see here and there in this video that I used a Keep Wet palette. I think the brand is called Wet Grass, and I have tested their older version before, and this is their newer version that is now, I think, being sold on their website. You can see it here. Oh no, is it called red grass? Yes, it's called red grass, like the color red. I will leave a link to the palette in the description box as well if I can find it. I will also try to link all of the other products that I used in this video. I am still testing this palette, so I don't want to give a full review yet, but so far it's been working really great. The paints really do not dry out, and I really like the new gloss that they have. They used to have these plastic sheets in between, and they still have them, but I just put the gloss palette inside of the wet palette, and so far it's working really great. So I will keep you updated on that. I don't use acrylics that often, so it's gonna be interesting to see how well this palette holds up. I will have to add a bit of water every now and then so it doesn't dry up, but yeah, we will see. You can see now that I am adding the colored pencils again, and this was definitely my favorite step for this painting. This added so much life to it. I don't know why, but the orange really made it pop a lot more. I also added a little bit of blue and some of my more vibrant colored pencil here. I am very aware of the fact that some of the paints and some of the colored pencils that I used here are not light fast. So we will see if I do display these, we will see how well they hold up. I will not sell any of the paintings. I do not really sell originals right now. Here you can see that I also did the corners. I did the corners of all of the canvases in today's video. With the ones that you're gonna see later on, one of them is still drying because I used oil paints, so I don't think that I included that in the video itself. But I did all of the edges of all of the canvases, and I just tried to match the colors with ones that are on the canvas. It was the easiest with the cat here. I just picked a similar purple tone. Here you can see I just really love the look of this one. I don't know why. And they have these small little easels to go on. Here we have the little mushroom, and then we also have the little cat that was still a little bit wet when I filmed this on the sides. And then we're gonna move on to canvases that are just ever so slightly bigger. Like I said, these are still very small, but they look a lot larger. This one I had already painted on, as you can see. I didn't particularly like the painting on this one. I did 3 of those, so I kept the 2 that I liked the most, but this was sitting in my cabinet for a while. It was not displayed, so I put some gesso on it and then just used oil paints on top of that, and that worked out great. You can kind of still see in certain parts the texture underneath from the previous layer. I sanded it down a bit, but it didn't do that much. But I definitely like the fact that I managed to repurpose a canvas, and I think this was a really nice and approachable size, though I did really struggle with some of the details here and there. So the first part of this was actually filmed several months ago, if not at the beginning of this year. I don't remember fully when this was filmed, but the first part that you can see on screen right now, this was a while ago. And then I let the first layer dry, and you know, with oil paints it takes a long time to dry. And then I did another layer on top recently. I think just yesterday or the day before was when I finished this painting, and I did a collection of seashells here. If you don't have oil paints, you can do the exact same thing with acrylics, and it's probably gonna be even easier. I mean, the blending part, of course, the gradients and stuff, that's really fun to play with oils because you can blend them forever and always, and it's gonna take forever for them to dry, and you can just create gradients like there's no tomorrow. But with acrylics, at least they dry and you can layer much more nicely. I guess that's why I really love gouache, like traditional gouache, because you can still blend after it dries because you can reactivate it with water, but you can also layer much better than on top of wet oil paint. I know that there's certain things that make the oil paints dry faster. I might experiment with that a little bit. Let me know if you have anything that you would recommend, anything that is, I don't know, a solvent or paint thinner or something that you would add to the oil paints so they dry more quickly. I would like them to dry maybe within a few days or so instead of months. I enjoy the fact that you can still blend them after several hours. So if they dry within a few hours, that would kind of defeat the point for me. So I don't know if there's an in-between here. I use oil paints here and there to play around with, but I never really mastered the medium. This is definitely an art medium that I started to use way later on in my artistic journey and haven't used that much, but every now and then I do feel like doing that. So this was one of those times where I thought, why not pick up oil painting again? But to be honest, I am often reminded why I don't choose this as my main medium. I find it particularly hard to do smaller details because the paint consistency is so it makes my brushes so flat. It does it inhibits the fact that my brushes come to a nice point, and then I add more paint thinner because that's what I'm used to with my other paints. Just add more water usually, and then it's easier, and it works to some degree with oil paints, but it also doesn't work that well, and it really takes away the opacity. So I am definitely still figuring out this medium. While I am very proficient with gouache and watercolors and definitely feel very comfortable with that stuff, I sometimes really like to use something that is more outside of my comfort zone just to play around with and to mix things up a little bit. It also really helps to prevent any art block or burnout or stuff. Sometimes I really like to just play around with something, even though it is more of a challenge to use these paints. It reminds me a little bit of oil pastels, which makes sense because obviously they're related a little bit. And with oil pastels, it's really hard to get fine details. And sometimes I really like that because then perfectionism has to take a little bit of a backseat here. And I have to work around this challenge, sort of. But I know that there's artists who make the tiniest details with oil paint. So I know that it is definitely possible. It is also possible with oil pastels or any other medium. Usually these types of mediums, I gravitate towards them when I just want to be a little bit more playful because it makes it a bit harder to be perfectionistic, and sometimes that is a good thing. So I really added a lot of tiny dots here. You can see I wanted to add some details that would be easy to add, and that is probably my favorite part of the piece. I really enjoy all of these little dots that you can see here. These were actually a lot easier to add than some of the other details that I had more of an issue with. And this is definitely the second layer here that we're doing right now, because you can see that it's not smudging with the previous layers, but it still blends really nicely into the dry paint. So even the new layer, it can be spread on the dried up layer really nicely. So there's definitely a beauty here with oil paints that is really fun. I would like to maybe do something impressionistic with oil paints at some point. I used tempera sticks in a video recently and painted one of the water lily paintings, and I really enjoyed that. So it's definitely on my list for oil paints as well. So here we have another one. Here I did an underpainting again, and I just put something on my canvas basically. Sometimes that is a good thing to have a little bit of a starting point. I diluted this a lot with my paint thinner, and that actually somewhat dried here. And then I painted a flower on top. This is actually a peony from one of my own reference pictures. And if you are interested in getting my reference pictures, then I highly recommend checking out my membership, the Cozy Creators Collective, because in there I have a lot of them, including this one. This is from the Peony Bundle. These are definitely my favorite flowers. I absolutely love the way that they look, and I also really like painting them. And so this was a nice choice for oil paints and for blending and layering. And this again is a really small canvas. It just looks a lot bigger on screen. If you're watching this on a big screen like the TV or something, you will definitely see all of these paintings a lot larger than they actually are in real life. So if the details aren't that good, I suppose, then that's because the original paintings are rather small. You can kind of see it in comparison to my hand. This canvas is still smaller than my hand. And in some regards, it is very approachable to use a small canvas. But then in others, it is even harder. Sometimes I recommend for beginners to use bigger canvases or bigger papers, depending on the medium, of course, because it can be easier because you don't have to worry about every little tiny brush stroke. If it is bigger, then it can be a lot more impressionistic and still create a beautiful picture. If we are working really small, then I often feel like every single brush stroke really counts. And so yeah, I definitely could do with creating something bigger with oil paints at some point, but I'd have to figure out, if I want to do that in a video, I'd have to figure out how to film that because it will not fit on my screen, and I don't really like having to move the camera around that much when I'm painting. So we will see if that ever happens. Maybe that could be a project that I do on the side. But yeah, I am pretty happy with this one, I have to say. It was definitely a process. I layered a lot here and I blended a lot. I definitely made the most of the oil paints with this one. I had to chop up this footage quite heavily to make it fit into a video because this was definitely the painting that took the longest out of all of the ones that I'm showing you today. So if you're looking for something simple and quick, then I definitely recommend doing the others. Or if you want to do something like this one here and you still want it to be quick, then I would say simplify it as much as you can, because this one was definitely one of those pieces where you take your time. And I did enjoy the process of this one. I really enjoyed the painting process. I did not enjoy the editing process of this one, I have to admit, because there was just so much footage. But I am really happy with how this looks now. And I have it displayed in my art studio. So I have been looking at this for quite a while and I still enjoy it. So I really hope that you enjoyed all of these ideas today. Don't forget to check out my courses. They are linked in the description box. Check out the Magical Worlds Savvy Bundle. And if you'd like to see more creative painting ideas, then check out this video next.